last night about the sweeping allegations by former Blackwater employees, first reported by The Nation magazine, against the mercenary firm deployed by a fundamentalist Christian to kill Iraqis while running a broad-ranging criminal enterprise. In our third story tonight, Countdown has now read those affidavits. We have new details. It has been alleged before that former CEO Eric Prince, a right-wing evangelical Christian, had been smuggling weapons into Iraq. 2 Blackwater employees pleaded guilty last year and turned government witness. A former Blackwater insider at the time told ABC News about the smuggled weapons, quote, "It's a war over there and our guys need them." But that's not the only arms smuggling Blackwater did, according to the affidavit of John Doe number 2, reportedly a 4-year Blackwater executive. Quote, Mr. Prince generated substantial revenues from participating in the illegal arms trade. In other words, he was an illegal arms dealer, a gun runner. Army officials told ABC last year at least one of Prince's M4 assault weapons ended up in the hands of insurgents. And the weaponry Blackwater used, quote, Mr. Prince obtained illegal ammunition from an American company called Lamas. The company sold ammunition designed to explode after penetrating within the human body. Mr. Prince's employees repeatedly used this illegal ammunition in Iraq to inflict maximum damage on Iraqis. Responding in a statement, Blackwater, which now calls itself Z, spelled X-E, called these accusations slander and said it looks forward to fighting them in a court case, for which, by the way, it is seeking a gag order. Returning here tonight, Jeremy Scahill, who broke this story as a contributor to The Nation and who also wrote Blackwater, the rise of the world's most powerful mercenary army. Thanks for coming in again, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me back.
The previous assumption that Blackwater had smuggled in weapons for its own use, at least in some sort of pretext of what we had sent them and spent money on them for. Where does that stand now?
Right. Well, let's remember that Eric Prince has modeled his company after the United States military. He had a security division. He has his own private CIA called Total Intelligence Solutions, which is headed by Bush's former head of counterterrorism, the man who was charged with finding bin Laden and failed to do so. He's now running Prince's private CIA. Prince also has a fleet of private planes. And one of the allegations that we have here is that Prince was using his private planes to bring weapons into Iraq without the U.S. military being aware of it. They were wrapping them in some kind of plastic wrap, and they were stored in dog food bags. Now, John Doe number 1, who was in the Marines and then served as a security operator for Blackwater, said right when he got there to work for Blackwater, one of the first things he saw in the Blackwater armory was people removing weapons out of these dog food bags. Now, we know that Blackwater has been under investigation since 2007 on allegations that they may have been involved with gun smuggling. At the time, the allegation was that that the weapons that Blackwater brought into Iraq ended up in the hands of a designated terrorist organization, the PKK. Henry Waxman, who was chair of the Oversight Committee, launched an investigation and then publicly accused the State Department Inspector General, Bush's State Department Inspector General, of hindering the Justice Department investigation into the allegations that Blackwater was involved with arms smuggling. Keith, in June of 2008, Blackwater's armory here in the United States was raided by ATF agents, and they seized 17 AK-47s. You can't have an AK-47 unless you're military active duty, you're some kind of government official, or you're law enforcement. So now that, combined with this testimony, really begs for a very serious investigation of Blackwater and weapons.
And so does this story about the exploding bullets. I mean, we know now about them. One Blackwater employee had already pleaded guilty to unwarranted shooting of Iraqis in that Baghdad massacre in September of 2007. What else does John Doe number 1, the former Marine who worked for them, say about the killing of the Iraqis there?
Can I tell you something about this Lamas ammunition? I wrote about this in my book years ago. A Blackwater operative by the name of Ben Thomas bragged openly of having used these weapons while he worked for Blackwater to shoot an Iraqi in the buttocks, and it killed him, and Ben Thomas described it exploding the entire left side of his body. He then went on to talk as though he was working for the company. The military had not been authorized to use these weapons, and yet Blackwater operatives are using them in Iraq to apparently explode the bodies of individuals by shooting them in the buttocks. When it comes to the questions of what else these individuals were doing, John Doe number 1 describes several specific instances of one of his Blackwater colleagues using a squad automatic weapon, a SAW automatic weapon, which is the kind of gun you use if you want to mow people down, to shoot at civilians that were not posing a threat to Blackwater. He then says that the Blackwater operatives covered it up with the State Department and tried to act as though it was a justifiable kill rather than the murder that he says it was.
You use the term hot wash
Right.
I mentioned it yesterday without really going into explanation of it. Can you provide that explanation?
Well, Keith, you're a sports guy. After a basketball game, you know the team sometimes gets together and they watch videotape of the game. The military, they do the same thing. A hot wash is basically when the soldiers get together after action, usually when bullets are fired, and they go over what happened during the course of that action. In Blackwater's case, they had videotaped these actions. They would watch them, and then they would take the hot wash and then they would turn it into a whitewash. They would essentially erase the videotapes, according to John Doe number 1, and then not pass them on to the State Department. What it sounds like is that he's alleging that they were killing civilians who were not posing a threat to Blackwater, and then covering up what were essentially extrajudicial killings or executions, and then covering it up to the State Department when they would be asked about it.
Is there, and it just occurs to me now, is there an implication in this between what we know, that nothing provoked what happened in the square in Baghdad in 2007? Is there an implication here that or other events that these people participated in, shooting people for practice? Was it practice?
Nicer Square doesn't seem like it was shooting people for practice. I have heard that people go out on these practice runs and they brag of killing ragheads or hajis, as they call them, using very racist, derogatory terms. And one of the allegations against Prince is that he knowingly sent men over there that he believed would participate in his war against Islam and his quest to, quote, eliminate Muslims, in the words of John Doe number 2. These are very, very serious allegations. The last thing I'll say, though, Keith, is we can talk about Blackwater until we're blue in the face. Who deployed Blackwater?
Yeah.
Who hired Blackwater? Who, unfortunately, President Obama continues to pay Blackwater millions of dollars on the federal payroll.
The mind reels. Jeremy Scahill of The Nation and the author of the definitive work on this company. Again, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.